Welcome to Animal Encounters. I'm Jackson. Today I'm examining people who trusted the wrong animals and got eaten alive, from a tiger attack in the Sundarbans to a hippo charging the man who called it his son. But first, I'll start deep in Montana, where we witnessed the last minutes of Doveline Musgrave being mauled by grizzly bears inside of her house. It was October 9th, 2016, and the first hard freeze of autumn had settled across the Flathead Range foothills of northwestern Montana. Overnight temperatures had dipped below 20 degrees. Grizzly bears, though, they were doing the exact opposite of retreating. The weeks leading up to denning are basically the most desperate feeding window of the entire year, and the bears roaming these foothills were running out of time. Doveline Musgrave was a 74-year-old retired elementary school librarian who lived alone on a 5-acre property at the end of a dirt road bordering national forest land. Nearest neighbor was about a quarter-mile away, so she was pretty much on her own out there. She had lived there for over 3 decades with her husband, Harlan, who had died 4 years earlier. His absence left the house quiet in a way she struggled to fill. Roughly 3 years before the incident, she had begun leaving food scraps on her back porch each evening. Bacon grease, fruit rinds, bread, leftover meat, all in an aluminum bowl. Within weeks, a grizzly sow and 2 cubs began visiting, and the visits became nightly. By the second year, there were at least 3 separate grizzlies showing up regularly, and Doveline had gotten into the habit of watching them eat from behind her kitchen door. She ended up telling a neighbor that the bears were basically her company now that Harlan was gone. I think what makes this one so difficult for me is that the problem wasn't stupidity or recklessness. She was lonely. 4 years at the end of a dirt road with nobody coming by, and these bears showed up every single night. When she told her neighbor they were her company, I believe she meant it completely, and honestly, that's the part I can't argue with. Officers from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks visited multiple times over the following years, issuing warnings and explaining that continued feeding could result in fines or the removal of habituated bears. Doveline heard them out, but didn't change a thing. Her adult daughter, in Oregon, argued with her about it repeatedly. Doveline dismissed her the same way she had dismissed the officers. By October 2016, trail camera footage later recovered by investigators showed at least 4 grizzlies visiting regularly. The one that worried people most was this big male that had started showing up in recent weeks, getting there earlier and earlier, hanging around the porch longer, actually pressing against the screen door with its nose and paws. Food conditioning had eroded its natural avoidance of human structures entirely. The trail camera footage is what got under my skin when I read through the investigation. There's this 600-pound grizzly pressing its nose against a screen door handle, and on the other side of the glass, a woman is putting scraps into a bowl for it. How do you look at that and not feel 2 completely different things at once? On the evening of October 9th, the temperature was dropping fast. Doveline prepared a bowl of scraps and opened her back door. Grizzly bears are among North America's most powerful predators, with adult males weighing between 400 and 700 pounds. In the weeks before hibernation, they go through this phase called hyperphagia, where they're basically eating non-stop, sometimes over 20,000 calories a day. When food conditioned through repeated feeding, grizzlies may begin entering structures or testing barriers. Wildlife officers consider that level of habituation a critical public safety emergency. The large male was already standing on the porch when Doveline opened the door, closer than any bear had ever been before. The bear pushed through the aging screen door frame almost instantly. What happened next was reconstructed by investigators from scene evidence. The bear pushed through the door into the kitchen, and Doveline was knocked to the floor. Investigators believed the sudden close-range contact inside the confined kitchen triggered a chaotic food-conditioned attack response. Behavior was consistent with a reactive, confused, and explosively aggressive bear in an unfamiliar environment. Scene evidence indicated a sustained mauling in the kitchen, with claw and bite injuries concentrated on Doveline's upper body, arms, and head. For a 74-year-old woman living by herself, those injuries were just not survivable. The bear exited through the back door, which had remained open. I grew up in kitchens that probably looked a lot like Doveline's. Dish rack by the sink, linoleum floor, maybe a radio on the counter. My brain keeps rejecting the idea of a grizzly bear inside that space, panicking with a woman on the floor, because those 2 things don't belong in the same room and never should have been. Doveline's daughter tried calling the next morning and got no answer, so she called a neighbor to go check. The neighbor found the back door open, the kitchen in disarray, and Doveline deceased on the floor. DNA recovered at the scene, and trail camera footage from the property identified the large male as the likely bear involved, and it was located and lethally removed. Someone from the state drove out to that property, sat down, and put the warning on paper multiple times, and she went right back to feeding them that same evening. I've spent more time than I probably should have trying to figure out what else anyone could have done, and I honestly don't have an answer for it. I've been sitting with Doveline's story for a while now, and I still don't know where to put it in my head. The next one hit me in a completely different place though, because Tohurul Kalashi wasn't feeding wild animals off his back porch. He was following a tradition his father taught him, and his father's father before that, walking into the same forest his family had worked for generations. It was April 14th. 2014, and the humid air hung motionless over the tidal channels of the Sundarbans, the largest mangrove forest on Earth. Honey season had kicked off, and hundreds of traditional collectors were heading into the forest interior to do what their families had done for as long as anyone could remember. The Sundarbans is home to one of the largest remaining Bengal tiger populations on Earth, and these tigers are responsible for recurring fatal attacks on those who enter their territory each year. Tohurul Kalashi was a 50-year-old traditional honey collector, known locally as a mawali, from a river village on the forest's edge. Tohurul had been going into the forest every spring for over 25 years, working his way through the tidal channels and the mangrove roots to find wild beehives deep in tiger country. He had survived every season through experience and strict adherence to traditional protections, most notably clay masks worn on the back of the head, to confuse tigers that prefer to ambush from behind. His son, Nur Kalashi, 22, was accompanying him for the third consecutive season. The group headed into the forest on April 11th, 6 collectors carrying machetes, smoke torches, and drums. They went by wooden boat, pushing deeper into the mangrove over 3 solid days of good harvesting. On the morning of April 14th, Tohurul identified a large cluster of wild beehives in a mature sundari tree, roughly 200 yards from the channel bank. Getting to the hives meant pushing through thick, waterlogged vegetation where you could barely see a few feet in front of you. Tohurul instructed the group to keep formation and maintain noise, but the hive cluster required him to push ahead alone. He moved approximately 40 yards beyond the group. His clay mask was pushed up on top of his head as he looked upward at the branches. This is the detail that follows me home from this story. 25 years he wore that mask, 25 seasons of it being part of the routine, and then one morning he pushes it up on his forehead to get a better look at a beehive. Whether the mask would have helped is impossible to know, but it had been part of his protection for decades, and in that moment, it wasn't where it needed to be. Bengal tigers in the Sundarbans are known for going after people way more than tigers in other regions, probably because the habitat is so stressed and humans keep pushing further into their space. Tigers are ambush predators that attack from behind, closing distance through dense cover. A tiger's killing bite is usually directed at the neck or throat, causing devastating trauma that can incapacitate prey within seconds. The clay mask tradition directly acknowledges the rear attack pattern, though their effectiveness remains debated and inconsistent. Wildlife officers considered it likely the tiger had already been moving through the area when the collectors approached. Tohurul had walked directly into its space. According to what Noor and the other collectors told forest rangers afterward, they heard this brief cry that got cut off almost immediately, then the sound of thrashing and something big crashing through the vegetation. The group rushed toward the sound. By the time they arrived, the tiger had dragged Tohurul approximately 15 yards into the mangrove tangle. They could see him on the ground, the tiger positioned over him. The collectors shouted and banged machetes against roots. The tiger retreated briefly, but did not leave. When 2 of them moved closer toward Tohurul, the tiger came right back and dragged him further into the mangroves. From what the group could see, he had taken catastrophic wounds to the neck and head, and he wasn't moving by the time the tiger pulled him away a second time. With no firearms, there was nothing more they could do. When I try to imagine being one of those 6 men, standing in waist-deep water holding a machete, watching a tiger drag your friend into the roots, something in me just shuts down. They ran at it, They screamed, they banged metal on wood, and the tiger looked at all of them and came back for him anyway. Nothing about having 5 people beside you helps when the animal simply does not care. Noor was 22 years old, and he is going to carry that mourning for the rest of his life. I don't know if he still goes into the forest during honey season. Part of me hopes he found another way to make a living. The collectors retreated to their boat and contacted forest rangers by emergency radio. A recovery team entered the following morning. Tohurul's remains were found roughly 100 yards from where it happened, and evidence indicated the tiger had fed. His death got recorded as one of that season's tiger fatalities in the Sundarbans, and the tiger was never tracked down, which is standard there since they treat any attack inside the mangrove as a known risk. Tohurul did everything his tradition taught him to do, and I find that so much harder to sit with than the stories where somebody made a clear mistake. What happened next in Sri Lanka shook me for a completely different reason, though, because there the problem wasn't too little experience, it was too much. It was February 6th, 2015, and the morning mist clung to the valleys of Sri Lanka's central highlands. There was this privately owned elephant facility just outside Kandy that kept 6 elephants for ceremonial processions, timber work, and tourist visits. Premaratne Ekanayake was a 54-year-old mahout with over 30 years of experience, a profession inherited from his father. For 15 years, he had worked primarily with a single elephant, a 42-year-old male named Doranagala, weighing approximately 9,500 pounds. Premaratne was with this animal every single day, bathing him, feeding him by hand, spending thousands of hours right next to him. Visitors to the facility often recognized the pair because of how long they had worked together. Janaka Wickramasinghe, 33, had served as Premaratne's assistant for 5 years. Over the previous 2 weeks, Janaka noticed behavioral changes in Doranagala. These dark, oily streaks had started running down from the glands on both sides of the elephant's head, and the animal was getting more agitated by the day, refusing commands, shoving into barriers, trumpeting at night. Janaka recognized the signs and raised his concerns directly. Premaratne basically brushed it off, said he'd handled Doranagala through similar episodes before, and that the bond between them was the only safety measure that mattered. The facility had no formal must management protocol. Here's what I can't get past with this one. Janaka did everything right. He saw the secretions, recognized must, went to his senior, and said something. And Premaratne looked at the same warning signs and decided the relationship would hold. I've read enough incidents by now to see that the person who dismisses the warning is almost always the one with the most time in, and I still haven't figured out why experience does that to people. On the morning of February 6th, Premaratne entered the enclosure alone to begin the daily routine. Janaka was preparing feed 50 yards away. Asian elephants are absolutely massive, with the males hitting anywhere from 8,000 to 11,000 pounds. They go through this hormonal phase called must, where testosterone levels can rise dramatically, and they can become way more aggressive and unpredictable, even toward people they've known their entire lives. Mahout fatalities during must are well documented across Sri Lanka and India. According to Janaka, he heard a sudden yell from the enclosure followed by the heavy thud of something hitting the ground. Then the elephant started trumpeting non-stop. Janaka ran to the fence. He could see Doranagala standing over Premaratne, ears flared, head raised, a posture associated with heightened aggression. Scene evidence suggested the elephant knocked Premaratne to the ground before bringing a front foot down on his chest, pinning and crushing his torso with overwhelming force. Janaka tried everything he could to get the elephant's attention, banging a metal pole against the fence over and over, but the elephant just charged the fence line, then went right back and stood over Premaratne. Other staff arrived with a vehicle and noise-making equipment. It took approximately 20 minutes to drive the elephant to the far side of the enclosure. 20 minutes Janaka stood on the wrong side of that fence, banging a metal pole, while a 9,000-pound elephant stood over the man who'd trained him for 5 years. I don't have anything meaningful to say about that. Some images just sit in your chest and refuse to move. Premaratne was pronounced dead at the scene. Wildlife authorities confirmed the elephant had been in must for 2 weeks. The facility was cited for lacking any must protocol. Doranagala was transferred to a government facility with isolation infrastructure. I've been turning the Sri Lanka story over for days, and I keep landing in the same place. Trust that runs 15 years deep doesn't fade, it hardens, and eventually you can't see around it. The story out of Australia is almost the opposite, though. Corwin Haldane didn't trust an animal. He trusted a routine, and 20 years of the same swim in the same water convinced him nothing would ever change. It was September 12, 2017, and the late dry season had baked the top end of Australia's Northern Territory into a cracked mosaic of red dirt and bleached grass. It had been over 100 degrees for days straight, and the whole landscape was just shimmering under this cloudless sky. Corwin Haldane was a 55-year-old cattle station hand who had worked remote properties across Arnhem Land for over 20 years. There was this big freshwater billabong on the property that Corwin had been swimming in basically every afternoon for as long as anyone could remember. Most days after work, he'd walk over, leave his boots and shirt on the bank, and just wade in. Earlier that dry season, one of the junior station hands said he'd spotted a big saltwater crocodile in a creek system that connects to the billabong when the water's high. Corwin didn't buy it, said the billabong was freshwater and way too far inland. He had never seen one there. Station management posted warning signs. Corwin ignored them. It started to bother me how often the person closest to the danger is the last one to see it. A junior hand spots one crocodile and reports it immediately. Corwin swims that water every day for 20 years and can't picture anything in it that would hurt him. Daily exposure quietly switches off the part of your brain responsible for keeping you alert, and I'm not sure any number of posted signs can switch it back on. By September, the billabong had shrunk to about half its normal size, and the creek had dried up months earlier, meaning large animals that entered during the wet season could have become isolated in a much smaller and murkier body of water. On the afternoon of September 12th, it was 104 degrees. Corwin walked to the billabong alone. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptiles on Earth, with males in the Northern Territory regularly exceeding 15 feet and over 1,000 pounds. These things can sit completely still for hours under murky water, and when the dry season hits, they end up moving inland through creek systems and getting stuck in freshwater billabongs that people assume are safe. A concealed crocodile can launch with explosive speed, giving prey almost no time to react. No witnesses were present. The entire sequence was reconstructed by police and wildlife investigators from scene evidence. Corwin's boots and shirt were found on the bank at his usual entry point. Drag marks indicated he had waded to waist depth, and investigators determined the crocodile attacked in shallow water, consistent with an ambush from concealment. Disturbed mud and torn vegetation pointed to a violent struggle before drag marks led into the deepest section. The boots are what I keep seeing, lined up neatly on the mud like he'd left them at his front door. He set them down, walked into the water, and those boots were still sitting there when the search party showed up at dusk. There's something about the way a dead man's belongings just stay exactly where he put them that I wasn't prepared for. When Corwin didn't come back by evening, the other station workers drove out to the billabong and found his stuff, plus the drag marks going into the water. A recovery operation over the following days located partial remains. The crocodile was trapped and destroyed, measuring 16 feet, 4 inches. When I read that measurement, I tried to picture something 16 feet long stretched across my apartment, and it wouldn't fit wall to wall. That animal lived in the billabong for months, while Corwin waded past it afternoon after afternoon, and whether the crocodile had avoided him previously or simply never had the opportunity, I genuinely don't know which answer is worse. The Northern Territory government referenced the incident in safety campaigns about inland crocodile movement during the dry season, stressing that any water connected to tidal systems, even seasonally, should be treated as potential crocodile habitat year-round. There's something about the silence of that billabong at dusk, boots on the mud, and drag marks into still water that I haven't been able to put down. India's story got under my skin in a different way, though, because Prabhavati Negi didn't ignore a new danger. The danger was new, her path wasn't, and she had no reason to think that evening would be different from the 4 decades of evenings that came before. It was March 18th, 2018, and the last weeks of winter gripped the Himalayan foothills of Himachal Pradesh. Snow was still hanging on the higher ridges, and the oak and deodar forests looked dark and heavy against the pale sky. Prey animals were at their lowest numbers, and leopard attacks on livestock across the Kulu Valley had been getting worse for weeks. Prabhawati Negi was a 67-year-old retired schoolteacher who lived alone in a traditional stone house at the upper edge of a small hill village at roughly 6,500 feet elevation, backed directly against dense forest. In the 3 weeks before this, leopard sightings had really picked up. 2 goats had been killed and dragged off, and paw prints were showing up on the footpaths. The Forest Department issued an advisory urging residents to avoid walking alone after dusk. Several families adjusted their routines. Prabhawati had not. Her son, Vikrant, about an hour away, kept calling and asking her to come stay with him until things calmed down. She wouldn't hear it, kept saying she'd been there 40 years and leopards had never been a problem. Her evening routine remained unchanged. She walked 200 yards down a footpath to her neighbor's house for tea and radio, returning after dark with a small flashlight through scrubby oak forest. I walked 200 yards across a parking lot last week just to feel what that distance is, and it took me less than 3 minutes at a slow pace. Front door to the neighbor's kitchen, that's all it was. And somewhere inside those 3 minutes, it's entirely possible the leopard had passed near that same footpath on earlier nights without anyone realizing it. The part that unsettles me isn't the night it attacked. It's all the other nights when she walked right by and nothing happened and she had no idea. On the evening of March 18th, she followed her routine. Her neighbor later told investigators that Prabhawati left to walk home at approximately 7:15 p.m., the sun having set 40 minutes earlier. Leopards are the most adaptable of all big cats, thriving near dense human settlement across India. Adult males weigh between 110 and 160 pounds. They're solitary night hunters that rely on total concealment before they strike, killing with a powerful bite aimed at the throat or upper neck to rapidly incapacitate prey. Serious attacks and occasional fatalities are reported across parts of India, with conflict peaking when natural prey is scarce. No witnesses were present. The sequence was reconstructed by Forest Department officers and police from physical evidence. Prabhawati's flashlight was found on the footpath approximately 80 yards from her neighbor's house, still switched on. Drag marks, blood, and disturbed vegetation indicated the leopard attacked from dense scrub beside the path, consistent with a leopard ambush from concealment. The flashlight was still on when they found it, just lying in the dirt with its beam aimed at nothing, and she was already 30 yards into the undergrowth. Her hand opened so fast the light didn't even tumble. It just dropped straight down where she'd been standing and kept shining at an empty path. I have never been able to read that part of the report without my stomach dropping. Prabhawati's body was found approximately 30 yards off the path, partially concealed beneath a low rock overhang. The injuries matched what you'd expect from a leopard. Deep puncture wounds around the neck and base of the skull, claw marks across the shoulders and upper back. Evidence indicated the leopard had begun feeding before being disturbed, likely by village dogs, which neighbors reported barking aggressively beginning around 7:30 p.m. What I keep going back to is the dogs. Village dogs went absolutely crazy around 7:30 that night, just non-stop barking, and nobody checked because dogs in a hill village bark at everything all the time. The alarm sounded exactly when it should have, and it was indistinguishable from every false alarm that came before it. When Prabhawati didn't answer her door the next morning, the neighbor called Vikrant and he drove straight out. A search party found her remains before noon. Forest officers set a cage trap, and a mature male leopard was captured 2 nights later. Officials identified it as the likely animal responsible based on tracks, timing, and its behavior near the site. I find myself thinking about Vikrant more than anyone else in that story, about those phone calls where he asked his mother to please come stay and she said no every time. I wonder how often he replays them. The last story in this episode is the one that's followed me longest though, because what happened in South Africa wasn't an ambush on a forest path or a coincidence in the wild. It was an afternoon, feeding on a man's own property, with an animal he'd raised from a calf and named and loved for 6 years. It was January 22nd, 2013, and the midsummer sun beat down on the bushveld of Limpopo Province, South Africa. The rainy season had turned everything green and lush, tall grass everywhere, and the rivers all running full. Thunis Voslu was a 58-year-old semi-retired cattle farmer who lived with his wife, Maretha, 55. on a 10-acre property along a seasonal tributary of the Limpopo River system. The property included a large earthen dam that collected seasonal runoff, creating a permanent body of water surrounded by reeds and muddy banks. 6 years before this, Thunis found an orphaned hippo calf stuck in a drying pool after the floods pulled back, maybe 100 pounds, small enough to lift into a truck. Against the advice of neighbors, a local veterinarian, and provincial wildlife officers, he brought it home and raised it in the dam. He named the hippo Doeko. Over 6 years, the animal grew into a mature male, weighing approximately 3,500 pounds. Thunis hand-fed it sweet potatoes and fruit every afternoon, without exception. Neighbors and visitors had occasionally seen him sitting beside or leaning against the hippo in shallow water, and a regional newspaper ran a piece where he described Doko as being like a son to him. I've read that newspaper piece 5 or 6 times now, and every reading I understand him a little bit more, which honestly bothers me. 100-pound orphan in the back of a pickup, bottle feeding. Years of having this animal swim over and eat from your hand. Of course, it started to feel like love. The problem is that what Thunis experienced as a bond, Doko experienced as a feeding schedule, and the difference was invisible right up until it killed him. Wildlife conservation officers came out at least 3 separate times, and every visit they told him the same thing, that male hippos get territorial and dangerously aggressive once they hit sexual maturity, regardless of how they were raised. Thunis dismissed every warning. Neighbors reported increasingly alarming behavior over the previous year. The hippo charging the perimeter fence when people passed, bellowing at night, lunging at dogs near the water. Thunis maintained it was harmless. I need someone to walk me through how you watch a 3,000-pound animal charge your fence. Hear it screaming every night, see it snap at dogs near the water, and then stroll down to the dam the next afternoon with a bucket of sweet potatoes. The only explanation that makes sense to me is that Thunis stopped seeing a hippo a long time ago. He saw his son, and his son would never hurt him. On the afternoon of January 22nd, Maretha was inside the farmhouse. Thunis walked the familiar dirt path to the dam carrying a bucket of sweet potatoes, as he had done every afternoon for 6 years. Even though hippos only eat plants, they are one of the most dangerous large animals in Africa, with mature males reaching 3,000 to 4,000 pounds. Once the males hit maturity, they get incredibly territorial and will go after anything they see as a threat. Even humans they've known since birth. Their jaws open extraordinarily wide, revealing canine teeth exceeding 16 inches with immense bite force capable of crushing bone. Hippos raised by humans do not domesticate. According to Maretha, she heard a scream from the dam, followed by heavy splashing, and ran straight outside. By the time she reached a vantage point overlooking the water, she could see the hippo in the shallows. Thunis was nearby, motionless. She ran back and called emergency services. Investigators reconstructed the attack from physical evidence and Maretha's account. Thunis had waded into the shallows to feed the hippo, as he had thousands of times. Behavior was consistent with a sudden territorial charge. The bite wounds showed the hippo had clamped down on his upper body with massive force, and scene evidence pointed to repeated attacks consistent with territorial aggression. His injuries were not survivable. He'd done this thousands of times. Same path, same bucket, same afternoon light on the water, and the visit that killed him looked identical to everyone before it. I keep searching for whatever changed on January 22nd, and investigators believed years of increasing territorial behavior had likely reached a point where familiar human contact simply no longer mattered. By the time it showed, Thunis was already standing in the water. Emergency responders got to the property about 45 minutes later, and Thunis was pronounced dead right there at the scene. Wildlife authorities later euthanized the hippo, citing the danger posed by a fully mature territorial male that had killed after years of escalating aggression. The wildlife officials used the words tragic but predictable, and I wonder what that sounded like to Maretha. She watched her husband walk to that dam every afternoon for 6 years, heard him talk about Doko the way people talk about their children, and then one afternoon she heard a scream from the water and ran outside and found him lying motionless in the shallows. Predictable. I wonder if that word made it easier for her or if it made everything immeasurably worse.